slow down a little bit. Yeah, you gotta. No, and I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I actually hate when I don't like it when pastors. I specifically don't like when worship leaders do that. I remember being one of the worst times of my life was right after my divorce, all kind of stuff. I went to a worship conference, and the guy was kind of a famous worship leader up front, and he was sort of doing this. This is a revival, and God's on the move, and he was real pumping it all up. He's like, and if you miss this train, you don't want to miss this train, and you don't want to blah blah blah. He's not slowing down, and we're going after it. We're going after it. And I'm sitting there having just been completely, my whole life got pulled out from under me. And I'm doing the best I could just to even be at this place or even sing any of these songs. And I'm going, well, I guess that train's not for me then. And I remember sitting back there and the Lord saying to me, don't ever be a worship leader like that. Don't ever be a pastor like that. Like there's just something about, no, this train will come to a full stop to let you get on. You know, this is not something like you gotta muster up something when you're hurting to get on this train, right? So anyway, I am excited though. I am excited a lot because I have a really good message here for you. And I got points and I got slides and I got my whole thing. But as we were praying this morning, the Lord just did this little tweak of some of the things that Roger prayed and some of the things that popped in my mind, as I already told you, that sort of like became the central focus of my message all of a sudden. And that is that as Christians, we live, breathe, operate in this world with the Holy Spirit empowering in us. If you're a Christian here, you've given your life to Christ, the Bible is clear. The Holy Spirit comes to live in you. It says he comes and makes his abode in you. You have that Holy Spirit power to live, right? And then we got these crazy guys like James and Peter and people saying, consider it all joy when you encounter various trials and stuff. We have the God of the universe living inside of us. That means we can be very excited at the idea of a trial coming. Not because, oh, I just love trials and I'm going to have this fake faith of just plant my smile on it. No, they stink, right? And they're not fun. But what they are is a wait till you see what my God does. Wait till you see. And the problem is sometimes it is a wait. Sometimes it's a wait because God's got a lot of things he's doing. It's not just all about you. So he doesn't just fix your problems immediately. Sometimes there's a whole mess of other people that are part of the whole thing, and it takes a process and all that kind of stuff. We're going to see that this morning, and what we're going to see this morning is the opposite side of that. Why sometimes we don't have that excitement. Why sometimes we don't have that gumption in our heart to go wait to see what my God does. And I'm going to suggest this morning, and really you can fall asleep right after I say this thing because I just said it all. And it's this. It's that often our gods, or the one that we serve or whatever, is something you fashioned, and it's no wonder you don't trust that God. It's no wonder that God's puny or small because you've made him fit into your system. And then it's no wonder that you don't have gumption or trust or faith when you go through a trial. So that's what we're going to look at today. There it is. So now you can tune out if you want. Hopefully you won't. I got two things to do this morning. I want to kick off and introduce the series that we're going to do. So that's kind of a tack on to my message that I got to do in the beginning. And I'm going to try to go fast because it's going to take me 5, 6, 7 minutes. And that means it adds time to my message. And so I'm going to go fast. But here's what we're doing. In this next month, March has 5 Sundays and today. So there'll be six series episodes, if you want to call them. And all of our different pastors and Betty, we got a bunch of different speakers who are going to present different stories from the Bible. And the series is called Sunday School Stories with an Adult Perspective. Okay? Now, we don't do Sunday school here, and a lot of churches have stopped doing Sunday school. So some of you, I realize, may not even, when I say Sunday school, you might not even know what I'm talking about. How many people know what I'm talking about when I say Sunday school? Okay, that's just about everybody. My church that I grew up in, you got to church around 9 o'clock, and then everybody dispersed. All the families would disperse. So they'd have adult Sunday school, they'd have teenage Sunday school, they'd have little kids Sunday school, and then about 10:30, like we do here, would be what I called as a kid, big person church. Like that's big people church. So you'd go to Sunday school, and that's where you got to have all kinds of volunteers. Most of them were women, really neat people that would teach these kids, and we'd learn these stories, and we learned David and Goliath, and and Daniel in the lion's den and all these cool stories, right? And one funny quick story. I remember I'm like 7 years old. I think I was like 7. And there's maybe 50 kids in a room, and a bunch of like Sunday school teachers, all different ages, and they were going around and sharing prayer requests. Okay, this is just a funny memory I have. Sharing prayer requests. So each little kid's going, "Oh, I have one," and they say like, "My mom broke her arm." Oh, okay, we'll pray for that. Oh, my dad lost his job this week, so my uncle is really sick. And so all these people have like this heavy stuff. And I'm sitting there now, this 7-year-old kid, if you ever read Calvin and Hobbes, Calvin was written to be a lot like I was. I was just very imaginative, and I'm sitting there going, oh man, I need something to share. Everybody's got these cool prayer requests. I got to come up with something. So kind of went around the room, and I'm feeling sheepish because I didn't have anything. So I'm kind of going, So I kind of raised my hand, like, oh, Danny, what do you got? My grandpa had a heart attack. Now, both of my grandparents went to that church. Everybody in that room knows them very well. In fact, some of them probably had dinner with them that week. Okay? That's a total lie. Okay? In fact, it was like I didn't think ahead, so I couldn't even tell them which one. Because one of the ladies was like, well, which one? And I'm like, my Papa Stanislaus. And so, as you can imagine, word got out really fast before even big people church. Okay? Like it disseminated throughout all the adult Sunday school classes and all. My dad, being a pastor of that church, he's teaching one of those Sunday school classes, so it gets back to him. And so, and I'm just this stupid little kid. I'm feeling bad about it. I remember it well because I remember that yucky feeling. Like that's not the truth. And so, anyway, of course, big people church starts. All my grandparents are there, feeling fine, doing great. And so I'll never forget my dad had this look. He just had this look when I would lie to him, which I lied. I attempted lying a lot, and I was a terrible liar. And I think half the time my dad had grace towards me because he'd be just like, what? Like it was like, do you buy that? Do you buy that? And so anyway, he had a long talk with me. Why did you say that? Everybody here thinks that he had a heart attack now. Anyway, that was my Sunday school experience. That and Mrs. Van Artsdalen, who, if you went to that church, often in testimonials, when people would talk about when they became a Christian, they'd have like a Wednesday night before Thanksgiving service, and people would have an open mic, and people would come up and say what they're thankful for. You guys, it seemed like 2 out of 10 people would come up and be like, I became a Christian in Mrs. Van Artsdalen's class. I did. I learned about Jesus in Mrs. Van Artsdale, and that she's in heaven right now, and there's lots of people in heaven because of Mrs. Van Artsdale. And I can't wait to give her a hug someday. That was Sunday school, and she would do the flannel graph stuff with the little board, and you put the little peoples on there that you cut out and all. And some weeks Moses was Moses, and some weeks Moses was Jesus, and some weeks it was Jonah, and after a while as a little kid, you're like, that's the same guy with the beard. That's not Jesus. Anyway, but those Sunday school stories are amazing. They're amazing stories, and often pastors like me, they go, they're overdone. They've been done too much, and we've drawn out all the lessons there is to draw. Well, I think there's more, and I want to talk about it with that kind of fun look at them. And each one of our pastors is going to take a special story. If it goes over real well, maybe we'll do it again in the fall with more stories or something like that. Anyway, that's what we're kicking off. So here's what I want you to consider each week. Okay, each week that you're here, the next 5 weeks that we're here. Here's what I want you to consider. Now, it's in your bulletin. If you got a bulletin, I've made a printout of it so you can kind of keep it with you so we don't have to repeat this every week. But I'm going to have it up on the slide just in case you're a person who doesn't take a bulletin. Here's 4 things I want you to consider real quick. As we go through these stories, number 1, try to enter into it as if you've never heard it before. The problem is, as we go into it, there's familiarity. And so sometimes it's kind of like, I know where the story's going. See if you can to try to enter into it as if you've never heard it. One idea to do that, if you're a movie person like I am, it's always fun, even if you've seen a movie, to go see it with somebody who hasn't seen it yet. And that you kind of like can live vicariously through them, like re-see the movie through their eyes. Maybe there might be somebody here by chance who hasn't heard one of these stories. So try to live through it that way. Number two, it's sometimes helpful to pick out a character in the story and see if you identify with them. Often in Scripture, I identify with Peter. I don't like identifying with Peter, but I often do. And so some of these stories, it's just like, yeah, I'm kind of like that. That's me. Number three is imagine the story in a more modern setting, like today. Like, can you imagine, like, if Donald Trump or something like made a decree, like we're about to read about Nebuchadnezzar, something that's like really, really crazy. That's something that'll change your home life or your work life or school or whatever. Imagine this story in today's vernacular if you can. And number four, this is my favorite one to do, probably because I'm selfish or whatever. But how might the story play out if you were the main character? Would it have made it to the Bible? If you were the main character, would it even have made it to the Bible? Would it have made it to a Sunday school story? Would you be a cutout little character going on the felt board? What would you look like? You know, like put yourself in the story, okay? Those are things to consider. Today, as a backdrop, before we talk about the story, sometimes you guys know that I like to share some scripture as sort of our foundational principle that we're going to stand on today, okay, for our story. And this is part of the adult part, all right? Because we're going to talk about Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. Most of the time, when that story is told as a Sunday school story, it's all about the fiery furnace, how they didn't burn up, and we're going to talk about that. But that's like where the focus is. Usually the focus is, and look how neat that is. They didn't burn up in a furnace, right? And it is neat. But I want to focus on the fact that Nebuchadnezzar tried to force people to worship a different God. We're gonna look at that. We're gonna look at that because again, I'm gonna suggest that when we do that, that God that we make is pretty lame. And it's no wonder we don't trust, and so no wonder why we struggle sometimes with going through trials and our faith and that kind of thing. And so here's a couple things. I want to read Romans 1. You guys have heard this before, but this is to set the backdrop, okay? And I have it up on the screen, Romans 1:21. You can turn there if you have a Bible, if you want to. It's not where our text is going to be today, but this is just to set a backdrop. Or you can look up on the screen. For although they knew, this is starting in 1:21, for although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God or gave thanks to him. But their thinking became futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of an immortal God for images made to look like a mortal human being, and birds and animals and reptiles. And therefore God gave them over in the sinful desires of their hearts to sexual impurity, for the degrading of their bodies with one another. And guys, I don't know exactly the depth of what that means when God says he gives them over, but that sounds like an absolutely scary place to be. Just saying. And they exchanged the truth about God for a lie, and they worshipped and served the created things rather than the Creator, who is forever praised. Amen. That's our backdrop scripturally. Now I want you to look at this statement that I'm going to make here. This is brilliant. I can't remember who made it. I'm sorry. I wish I could quote it. But this needs to stick in your brain, okay? And we're going to use this as our backdrop. When people invent their own God, that God inevitably inherits the deficiencies of the people who made it. Okay? Listen to that again. When people invent their own God, that God inevitably inherits the deficiencies of the people who made it. He's just as dumb as us. Okay? In other words. So the big thought today, in keeping with this foundation I'm trying to lay before we even get to the story, is when God doesn't do what we think he should do, we're tempted and often succumb to making gods of our own. And then those are the gods that they inherit our deficiencies. Am I making sense? It's tempting to do that. And I'm going to go so far as to say, maybe today you'll find yourself going, well, if Trump or Musk or somebody set up some kind of big idol, I'm not going to bow down to that. But think for a minute before you start going down that road, because I'm including here as like a little God that we create, the compartmentalization that we do. When we take the so-called Yahweh God and we fit him into where we think he's supposed to be, that ain't God either. That's a God you made. Okay? I'm just saying it like it is. We think, oh, how horrible was it that all these people would bow to a big statue, and yet we'll watch 5 hours of TV. It's just something we got to be careful about how we look at things, okay? And so these are things I'm hoping will stir in you, not to condemn or convict you even, but to be able to start to turn your spirit into worshiping the true God who is extremely exciting. See, if you're here this morning and you're not excited about God, let's get him bigger in your life because you're not seeing him right. Okay, that's kind of the backdrop. So that's a backdrop of everything we're going to do. We're going to be in Daniel 3. That's where our story of Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego is. With all of that as a backdrop, what I want to do is I just want to set the story up real quick. We'll tell the story real quick, and then I'll have some observations at the end. Okay, that's what we're going to do. So we're in Daniel, the very beginning of Daniel 1. You don't have to go there. You can kind of keep your finger in Daniel 3 if you're in your Bibles. But Daniel 1 is where we kind of find out what the scene is. What the scene is, I'll just read it. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. So he took over Jerusalem and Judah and King Jehoiakim. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, along with some of the vessels of the house of God, and he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and he brought the vessels into the treasury of his God. Look, here's what's important about this, just something to know. You go and study it on your own. This Babylonian captivity period is a pretty significant time in Israel life, whatever you want to call it. There are scholars that believe that the entire Old Testament was pretty much written during the Babylonian captivity. Now, there are scholars who reject that, just so you know. But the Babylonian captivity is very predominant, a very big time in Israel's life. When you get to 4, the king begins to pick out the guys who look like they're healthy and good, and he's kind of picking them out. Now, essentially, he's kind of making slaves out of them, but he's really giving them jobs to do, and some of them are pretty important jobs. And he does this with Daniel, and he does it with these 3 other guys. Now, listen to it real quick. This is just in verse 4. I'm only in Daniel 1. We're just setting up the story. He began to pick youths in whom there was no defect, who were good-looking, showing intelligence, every branch of wisdom, endowed with understanding and discerning knowledge, and who had the ability for serving in the king's court. And he ordered him to teach them the literature and the language of the Chaldeans. These guys that he picked out, these hand-picked guys, Daniel being one, and these 3 boys we're going to talk about today, they're picked out by the king. These guys were healthy guys, and they began to be trained in all kinds of stuff. These guys would work for the king. I'm not going to get into the vernacular as to, when it comes down to it, on paper, in black and white, they're basically slaves because they were taken in as siege. And this is part of what we see slavery in the Bible. But he trains them, feeds them good, makes them important people in his kingdom. Just something to think about. Okay, so that's where we get our guys. That's where we get our guys. He picks these guys out. He picks out the best of the best. Daniel being one of them. Daniel, the writer of this book, and we're not going to talk about Daniel. Daniel will get talked about at a different session. But we meet these 3 guys: Hananiah, Mishael, however you say it, and Azariah, who would later become named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. 3 cool guys. By the time we see them in the story we're going to talk about today, the Hebrew is using the term men for these guys. So they're not as much young boys. At the very least, they're at least probably 13 or 14, but I'm guessing they're probably in their 20s. They're probably late teens, if not like 21, 22 or whatever, because they have prominent positions. The king has trained them. But I'm just letting you know that in Hebrew, when it says men, it can be also young men, and pretty much in the Hebrew tradition, that started at like 13, 14, that area. So that can kind of mess you up. But they're young guys, okay? At least we'll call them 20. That's just some background, okay? That's some background. Now the story, as you guys know, starts in Daniel 3, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but we'll read parts of it just to get through the story, okay? So if you're following, we're chapter 3. I'll start reading verse 1. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, the height of which was 60 cubits, and the width was 6 cubits, and he set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. I just read somewhere where they think they may have found the base of this statue. in that area. Kind of cool. By the way, I want to put this slide up. That's who we're talking about right now. So he built this idol. Okay. Um, again, I want you just to have in the back of your mind, why does what kind of kicks would Satan get out of making idols or getting somebody to make idols to take people's attention away? Just think about that for a minute. Because those kicks, in my opinion, would be he loves the fact that, like, ooh, God, see, I'm getting to worship something else and they don't even know. Ooh, look at the time they're wasting doing that because this is just a dumb idol, right? Like, I wonder if those are the kicks. I wonder if Satan even gets kicks. I think he's just a miserable dude. But let's just say he gets kicks out of that. Really, what he's getting kicks out of is the waste of time he's getting people to do. And then at the worst state is when he gets people who will actually sacrifice people to those things, right? That's it in its ultimate thing. Like Moloch, when kids would be like sacrificed to Moloch in horrible, horrible ways. Satan must really get kicks out of it. But my point is to say, it's important for me, at least in my life, to go, I don't want to give Satan any of those kicks with anything. That's why I mentioned TV or different types of ways that we entertain sometimes. Because I think Satan digs the fact that he can get somebody just worshiping a dumb idol and wasting their time doing that. But all of us that say, I would never do that, I sat and watched 4 hours of the Super Bowl. You know what I mean? Now, is that a sin? I'm not trying to go there. I'm not trying to go there. I'm just saying I want to have that. I want to be aware of that. I want to be aware. Think about that as we think of this statue. Again, here's that picture. This statue, I'm not going to get into all the math. I hate math. You guys know that. But anywhere from 70 to 90 feet, depending on whether they're like when you see the cubit sizes, if they're counting the base or not. But we're talking a very tall statue, and anywhere from 70 to 90 feet. Now, check this out. And again, I'm not going to do all the math. I saw the math, lots of numbers. I'm not going to bore you with that. But the math, the way it adds up, is if this thing was solid gold. We were talking about this. Sam's into gold stuff, and you were saying the price of an ounce right now is around $2,000, right? Something. Three. Okay. Let's just for an easy number, if the price of gold was $1,000 an ounce, this thing would have been, if it was solid, would have been worth $99+ billion. Okay. And with gold being more than that now, you're talking hundreds of billions of dollars. That's if this thing was solid gold. Now, most scholars go, that's why we don't believe it was solid. They'll say it was casted. They'll say it was built as a wooden statue or something, and they pour the gold over top of it. But here's something to think about. It's just interesting. Is that when you read ancient history about Nebuchadnezzar and those times, there's history that says, number one, that they used to build statues out of pure gold. There were statues to Baal and other things, maybe not quite as tall as this, but they were pure gold, because in those days, there's ancient history that says, in those days, gold was so prevalent that they saw silver as sort of a waste of time, just pebbles that were a waste. Like, get those out of our way. We don't have enough room to store silver. It's all because gold was so prevalent. So there's a possibility that this thing could have been made out of solid gold. The other thing we're not exactly sure about, and this is just some backdrop. This is to make it adult perspective as opposed to not something you would teach in Sunday school. But it is interesting that Nebuchadnezzar, in the first 2 chapters of Daniel, deals with a dream that he had. If you guys go back and read it sometime, he has this dream of a statue, and it's made out of different types. It's got gold and bronze and different things as you go down to the feet. And he has Daniel interpret that. And there's all kinds of, I don't have time to get into all that. But some scholars believe that he makes this statue almost as an act of rebellion. Like, oh, that statue was dumb. The one in my dream it was dumb, so I'm making one of pure gold. Yeah. Now, we don't know what it looked like, but most people kind of go, the way Nebuchadnezzar's attitude was, it probably was similar to looking like him. I wouldn't be surprised. Okay. Now, as we let's get into the story. I'm not going to tell the whole story. You guys know the story, but it's fun to talk about, especially if, like, you do what I said. Put yourself into the story. Okay? I love doing this. I used to love doing this when I would preach on this. This is a message I used to preach to when I got a chance to go to youth conferences and stuff. This is one of my favorite messages to do to the youth. I'm not going to say all the same things. But one of the things that I love to do is go put yourself in the story, particularly, I'm going to go back to this other slide. That's why I put the when would you bail? So put yourself in a story and think to yourself, when would I have bailed out? When would I have okay, yeah, I'm done with this. I'll bow to this stupid thing. Okay. The first part is the decree. Now, I'm just going to read you this. Nebuchadnezzar. This is verse 2. Nebuchadnezzar the king sent word to assemble, and then he lists these guys. I'm going to do it once. I'm not going to keep doing it because it does it a couple times. The satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And then it lists them again, and it lists them again, like it keeps on. And the satraps, and the prefects. Now, it's redundant, but I want you to know part of what scholars believe in the redundancy of this shows that this is actually an official document. That what we have here is sort of some repeating of an official document. So that's why they were very careful to list all the people involved and all the instruments in what I call the band. I don't like to read all the instruments every time because that's listed a couple of times. You're like, blah, 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 blah. It's the band. When the band plays, everybody was to bow to this idol. So I call this the first bail point, the first bailout point. Would you make it? Nebuchadnezzar himself, you're going to die if you don't bow to this thing. How many of it? It's just something to think about. We're going to pretend in a minute that we're all going to make it past that. You guys are all faithful people. We'll get past this. But just take a second. The king has decreed it. Isn't it better for you to stay alive? For you and your kids, your family? This is just a dumb idol. God's not going to be mad at me if I'm trying to stay alive. Right? So something to think about. One or two of us might have had an excuse to go, I'm going to bow to this thing. It's not going to change who I am. I'm not really being honest when I bow to it. You know what I mean? You see what I'm saying? Would we bail already? Like, will we already kind of be out? Will we already tank it? It's interesting to think about. It's interesting to think about. So, moving on, in verse 8, this is where some of the Chaldeans came forward. They come forward with charges against the Jews. That's verse 8, and I'll read 9. They responded and said to King Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. You yourself, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the sound of the band, I'm not going to read them all off, is supposed to fall down and worship the golden image. But whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the midst of the furnace of the blazing fire. There are certain Jews. Here comes the tattle. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over administration. And this is important, this verse, because these aren't just some guys. These are guys that have a relationship with Nebuchadnezzar. They've been trained. They're part of his crew. They're part of his leadership. There are certain that you've appointed over administration of the province of Babylon, namely Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have disregarded you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image you have set up. Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and anger, gave orders to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then to these men were brought before the king. Reading on, Nebuchadnezzar responded and said to them, this is so funny. Now imagine this, you guys. They're brought before the king. He's mad. At this point, I think he does like these guys, and so he's probably more mad that he has to deal with this than he is at them yet. And I say that because of this right here. It's as if the king is, he's like, look, guys, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I've set up? Now, if you're ready, now if you got a little bit scared coming to me, and now you're ready, at the moment you hear the band, fall down and worship the image that I've made, and very well, But look, if you will not worship, you will be immediately cast into the midst of the furnace of the blazing fire. And what God is there who can deliver you out of that hand, out of the hands? Out of my hands, he says. Out of my hands. What God can do that? Now I have a little note in my Bible that says, "Glad you asked." but think about this. This to me is the second bailout point. Okay, we stood up. We didn't bow to this thing. Now we're being brought before the king. Oh man, we're in a lot of trouble. Whoever in front of Nebuchadnezzar gets a second chance. This must be God. See, I think I could see myself bowing here. I could see it going like, well, this is a miracle. We got a second chance here. Nebuchadnezzar never does that. He's giving us a second. He's like, listen, guys. Listen, maybe you didn't hear the band. Or did you not hear the part that when the band plays, you're supposed to? Maybe it just didn't, he's being uncharacteristically soft here. Some of us would take that as almost like a God miracle. Oh, well, maybe now, okay. So I did the right thing. Now it's okay to bow. Okay, King, we're all good. Everybody's good. Everybody's happy. And the day would be nice. Go ahead. Band, go back to playing that song. We'll go, but you see what I mean? That's the second bail point that I wonder how much it would make it if we make it past that. Would we make it to this point? Where they say, so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to give you an answer concerning this. How many of you guys' translation says we do not need to be careful? You guys have anybody read this? That's what the King James says. We do not need to be careful. Meaning, we don't need any time. That's really what the Hebrew there is. We don't need time. We don't need time to think about it. None of that. None of it. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the furnace of the blazing fire, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. In other words, this ain't about you. What we serve is not you. Let's just get that straight. But even if he does not, I have that underlined. That was going to be my big point today. Even if he does not, let it be known to you, O king, that we're not going to serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. Just for time, I'm going to get to it. So he gets even madder. He jacks up the oven or the furnace another 7 times hotter. These furnaces were mostly used for the garbage and that kind of thing, but they were big, and so it was commonplace. Commonplace in even the Persian Empire and stuff like that they would throw people in. Unwanted people was just it was like an easy capital punishment. You disappoint the king, you get somebody mad, you murder somebody. It was just really easy to go chuck them in the furnace. So that was kind of commonplace. It's not really that different. And so what it says in verse 22 is that he takes some of his most valiant men, shackles up the 3 boys, the 3 guys, our young men, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, and they are ushered off to the furnace. Bail point number 3 for me. Okay, let's say we made it past our little meeting. I picture Meshach, Shadrach. If this was played out like a movie, I picture Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego sitting at a table eating and going, guys, we're not bound to this thing, right? And Shadrach's like, I'm not bound. And Meshach's like, yeah, better believe it. We're not bound to this thing. And Abednego going, I'm just kidding. Abednego going, yeah, I'm not either. So say we're in that meeting. I'm the guy going, well, let's think about this for a minute, guys, right? Okay, but let's say we made it past that meeting and we made it past the decree, and now we're all standing there when the music's playing. And we're looking, and one of us starts going, we're like, no, stay with me, right? You see one of us being like, no, my knees just hurt. Like some of us when we pray in a meal when it's in public, we're kind of doing like this. I used to do that when I was a youth pastor. People would pray at the meal, and I'd be like, oh, this looks funny. It was kind of just scratch my eye. Anyway, so let's say we get past that. Now we're on the hike to the furnace. This is where I'm like, okay, God, anytime. Anytime. We stuck up for you. I don't know if you're noticing this, but we stuck up for you in the face of at the time, what would have felt like the most powerful man in the universe. We stood up to him. That was cool, right? Did you notice they're taking us to the furnace? This is about the time when probably you should do something. It would look really good on your part right now to do something, right? This would have been one of my bail points because I would have got to the edge. I would have got taken right up to it. And I would have been like, well, hold on, let's talk about this. And I would have been like, right? How many of us would have maybe bailed at this point? The 4th time, and it comes right at this part, is I love this part. In verse 22, it says for the fact that he had raised the furnace up so hot, this is for this reason, because the king's command was urgent and the furnace had been made extremely hot. The flame of the fire slew those men who carried Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So something about it, they get close to it, and these flames are so hot that it kills the valiant men. And that's where I'd have been like, it starts. This is where it starts. It's happening. Okay, God, let's do this. And the very next verses, they're still falling into the furnace. Anyway, I just think of some of those Baal points. Of course, you guys, you know the story. King looks out, doesn't just see 3 guys walking around, he sees 4. Not only does he see that, but he sees guys walking around free, which means the fire, the Bible says, burnt up the things that bound them. So the fire didn't change like any kind of science for that, for killing the valiant men and burning up their stuff. It just didn't burn their clothes. And even when they came out, it said they didn't even smell like smoke. They didn't even smell bad. The king looks out, and it's just an amazing. 25, it says, the king looks out. He answered and said, "Look, I see 4 men loosed and walking about in the midst of the fire without harm, and the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods." And so he calls Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego out. I love how he says, "You servants of the Most High God, come on out of here." And then Nebuchadnezzar makes a decree in verses 28 to 29. This is how the story ends. Nebuchadnezzar responds and says, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who put their trust in him, violating the king's command and yielding up their bodies so as not to serve or worship any god except their own God." And verse 29 says, "Therefore, I make a decree," this is the king, "that any people, nation, or tongue that speaks anything offensive against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb." There's Nebuchadnezzar. "And their houses reduced to a rubbish heap, inasmuch as there is no other God who is able to deliver in this way." Now, little sidebar, it's not as fun as we'd want to. I don't think this is like a full-on conversion of Nebuchadnezzar. I think he still believes he's a polytheistic guy. I just think that he goes, "Hey, your God, amongst all the others, is a pretty good one. He saved you." I think that's what we're getting here. But still, this praise goes out as a decree from the king, because Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego lasted all the way to the fire. Pretty cool. So some observations, and I'm going to call them the 4 C's, and this is where we'll start to get to the end here. The 4 C's, just because it's fun to name things. I like doing that. Maybe help you remember. The first one of the 4 C's, lessons, observations we can pull out of this story in a kind of more of an adult way, is community. Community. This story, to me, for my money, is such a great story as to why we need each other. Guys, this is why we need church. I'm not ever going to be a pastor that makes you, or hopefully doesn't ever make you feel bad if you have to miss church every once in a while or you're not here or something like that. I don't want to be that kind of pastor, but I will say we need you here. I will say we all need each other here. We need community. When I tell the kids this story, here's what I mention. The Bible nowhere says that Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego were standing together like you see in all the pictures. All the pictures, in fact, I even have one that I didn't show you. All the pictures makes it look like that. Okay, sorry, that's a little blurry. You Google Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, and there's going to be this picture of 3 guys standing tall, standing firm, with a bunch of people bowing, and they're not, and they're together. Now, that's probably what happened, but the Bible doesn't say that that's what happened. Why am I saying that? Why am I getting at that? Imagine they weren't together. Just for a second, imagine the band started playing, and Shadrach's walking down the street after a banana he just bought. And Abednego's over working someplace else or doing something. I don't know that happened, and I'm not trying to tell you that it did, but my point is the 3 guys stood no matter what. We used to tell the youth this. I used to be like, you know what that says to me? Is that all these kids sitting here at this conference or in this youth group, it means there are going to be times when you're in the hallway at school and you feel alone, but you're going to stand up because you got other people who are going to stand up too, and they got your back. That's why we need each other. You guys are going to be alone. You're going to be alone at work. You're going to be alone someplace. And you need to know that you've got people that have your back. They're going to stand with you, whether we're all together or whether we're alone. I'm just going to tell you now, I'm not saying like you don't get to go to heaven if you don't go to church. But I want to tell you what, man, it is harder. It is harder to walk through this world without community. The first C, a good lesson from this story, is community. These guys had it because they had each other. We have to have that. All of us. I need you guys. You need me. We all need each other. As much as possible. And that means trying to get here whenever we can. I mean, because face to face, there's something about like, I got you, I got you, I got you, I love you, I got you. Important. Community. That's a good one. The second C is clock. Now this one I'm mentioning because typically this is the main subject that always gets talked about with this story, and it's God's timing, right? A lot of times I've heard this message many times, so I won't belabor it. This idea of God's timing, that our faith, is that we have to believe that God's timing is perfect. He did not do this story the way I would have liked it or what I would have done. Remember? I said I would have liked to, on the way, seen like all these men slew like right in front of me, and Nebuchadnezzar hung up on a tree and like all this my Gladiator and Braveheart stuff, But no, these guys get all the way to the fire. Like, God, what are you doing? Right? He doesn't write the stories the way I would. His timing. You guys, we have to trust his timing. And so my question with this one is just simply, is your faith in what he does or who he is? Guys, this is the whole Pentecostal versus conservative debate. On one side, you have people who trust way too much just in what he does. He's going to do this. He's going to do it. He's got to do it. I have expectation, blah, blah, blah. I'm speaking that at you and blah, blah, blah. And you get up and you speak it into existence. Like, it's the one thing I'm a little embarrassed about of what I am. I'm a Pentecostal. But I was raised in the other side of it being like, you just got to trust who he is. And there's a balance there. But it's about our faith. My faith at the end of the day is in his goodness. That I don't have to worry about what I'm seeing. I just don't have to worry about it. And I definitely don't have to worry about his timing. His timing. Remember what Mike said a couple weeks ago? If it ain't good right now, just wait. It's getting good. God causes everything to work together for the good for those who are called and love him. It's going to get good. If it's not good right now, it's going to get good. He's working on it. Timing. Clock is that one. So number 3. I said there was 4. 3 is concern. And what I mean by that is simply this question. What is our chief concern? What is our chief concern? This is kind of a convicting question for you, but I want you to think about this. Is your concern more in his honor or your comfort? These guys risked their life simply out of honoring God. They were like, I'm not even going to come close to worshiping something else. I'm not, because just honor alone, that God deserves everything in me. I'm not even touching that. These guys had that like in them. It was something about it. And they had it in them regardless of whether they felt like they were actually going to get saved or not. You need to understand that. That was such a faith statement of going, even if he doesn't, here's the point. His honor, it needs to be upheld. Even if he doesn't do it the way I want him to do it. But we're not bowing down to the thing you made. And we can say that too. I'm not going to put all my time on a Saturday afternoon doing such and such because it just keeps me on the couch. I'm not going to do that. There's certain cultural things that want to bid for our worship. We just have to be careful. Again, I'm not telling Gretchen and I have a series we're watching right now. I'm not telling you not to do that. I'm just trying to say, like, one of the things that I'm always doing is I'm putting into check how much am I into this compared to how much I'm on this. Okay? I'm not trying to make you feel bad, but what's your concern? His honor or your comfort? And I'm going to tell you, I struggle with that because I love being comfortable. Last one is cause. Cause. Now, this is where I'm going to say right off the get that. So what might be the cause of why God would wait till they got all the way to the furnace? We could ask that. We could talk about it. All this. I want to first say, I am always going to tell you as a pastor that the why question is the worst question. You go through something and you go, I just want to know why. And I always want to be like, no, you don't. Number one, because it doesn't help. Knowing why doesn't help. And half the time, if God tried to explain it to you, it would be like trying to explain astrophysics to an ant. Like, you got to realize how much is under God's control and in his hand and his sovereign will and all that kind of stuff. You think he's going to explain to you why you're going through something that's like, and at worst, maybe his why, you're not going to like the answer. Like, what if his why is like, because you need to go through this right now? Like, because you were being a jerk and you need to get knocked down off the stilts a little bit. Like, what if he said that? Can you imagine if God was just like, yeah, because you needed this? I wonder sometimes, I've been seeing it lately with my mom and her tumor and all, and everything worked out. It's almost like, God, did my mom just need a rest? Like, did she just need to get taken out of regular life for a minute so that she could rest? I wouldn't put that past God. Now, that's an anti-Pentecostal thing. I have been rebuked for saying such things. I said one time from the front, I was preaching, and I said, I wouldn't put it past God, who wanted me to be a worship leader and a pastor all my life. I was called to do that. But I rebelled. I did like Jonah. I want to be a star football player. I want to be a star baseball player. And in my when I started getting letters from colleges and different things, and I was really good and all this stuff, my leg, out of the blue in a football game, bent the wrong way. I blew my ACL, PCL, medial collateral. Almost a full dislocation. And when you watched it on film, I wasn't even being hit. I was just about to hit a guy, and I planted, and I just bent the wrong way. And there's times when I feel like God was going, I and you will be so much happier if you're a worship leader and a pastor. So I got rebuked for that. God never does that. He never does that. I hope he does. I'm just telling you, that's why I hope he did that. I hope he went, boink, you're done. Oh, I can name, yeah, we can name, I do believe he does that. He never does it to hurt you. Okay? Just keep that in mind. He's not into hurting you. That I will say. The cause, and we need to be done, but let me just throw, this is a straight from Roy Hicks Jr., just 3 quick things, and then I'm going to make a conclusion statement. We'll be done. But he said, but if we want to kind of have some kind of interesting ideas, why sometimes he lets us go into the fire. One, fire purifies our faith. Usually it shows us what's there. It usually purifies everything around us, shows us what we're standing on. So sometimes God will let us go into the fire just to be able to see that. Sometimes he'll let us go into the fire just to stand with us so we see that he stands with us. That's a cool another place of that story. Sometimes fire is what burns off what binds us. There's that too. Those are some Roy Hicks points, Roy Hicks Jr. points that I just wanted to throw at you. I didn't want to miss those. Okay. So here, I'm landing the plane. This is my conclusion statement. I'm just going to read it so that I don't ramble, okay? But I want you to ask this question. So who is your God? Who is your God? Is he creator God of you and the universe? Worth honoring with your whole life? Worth standing for even in the defiance of world leaders? Or what about in defiance of cultural norms and shifts? Is he worth that? Has God earned your complete and humble submission to him? To him, his word, his plan, or have you fashioned him to fit in your space? Have you fashioned him to fit in your space, your plans, calling on him for your needs, expecting him to meet your expectations? Who is your God? When we reduce God down to fit him where we need him, we end up with a very small God. Not the God of the Bible, and certainly not the God of these wondrous stories that we're going to be talking about this next month. Certainly not him. This God we fashion, remember, inherits the deficiencies of our fallen and broken state. Keep that in mind. And it's no wonder we don't trust that God. It's no wonder we don't trust him. So who is your God? Who is your God? Another question, another way to word it. just to have this in your mind as we're done. Do you hold him or does he hold you? Man, that's convicting to me. Do you hold him in your little compartment space or does he hold you in everything you are? It goes back to the way we started with the word that I really feel like the Lord gave me this morning as we were praying and worshiping. I want to have a God that's a just wait and see what he does. I want to start learning to be more like that. Remember we said this last year? Like the yeah, but look, God, right? I said that if you weren't here. It's the tell me your problems. Yeah, that sounds bad. Ooh, that sounds bad. Ooh, that sounds bad. But yeah, look. Like that's fine. That stinks. Yeah, that stinks. I'm sorry you're going to do it. Yeah, but look. I want to yeah, but look, God. I want to yeah, but look, church. Wait till you see what he's going to do. I want you to be offended at me one day when you go, man, I'm really sick right now. Wait till you see what he's going to do. I hate when you say that. I wanted to complain. You know, I want to be that kind of church. Not that we're insensitive. You get me? Do you hold him or does he hold you? Let's pray. Oh, Lord. You know when I'm preaching this stuff that I'm preaching right at myself too. I sometimes wonder if you giggle while I'm talking. Just like, yeah, Dan, how about it? It's nice to say that to everybody, isn't it? And so, very honestly, Lord, before you and everybody here, I all of these things I know that I need to work on too, and I want to be all about that. I want to be able to honor you with everything. To truly have humbly given you my entire heart, my life, and not have you have to fit into any kind of compartment that I make, but for me to just fit into your wonderful hands. Lord, would you hold this church? Will you help us have a renewed faith, a renewed excitement that you're holding this church? That we don't hold you, Lord. We don't bring you down and fit you into a seat here. Lord, that you're holding us. You're holding this church. You're holding the grounds we're meeting on. You're holding this community together. You're holding the city together. You put rain where rain needs to go. You grow food where food needs to grow. You touch us where we need to be touched. You let us go through hardships where we need to wake up to things sometimes. But in all of it, you are always awesome and always wondrous in every one of those things. And all we have to do is look at the cross to see that. You, Lord, you dig doing big, cool things in the midst of dark, horrible things. Lord, you just love shining in those moments. Will you give us the kind of faith that says, whether we're going through something great and everything is cake and ice cream, we'll serve you and worship you for that. But Lord, when it gets really tough and we're dealing with a loved one who's hurting or we're hurting and we want to be grumpy and we want to snap at people and all that kind of stuff, all the stuff that pain does to us, will you give us in our hearts a true spirit of a wait till you see what my God does? Will you put that in our hearts, Lord? And I need to pray one other thing, just to say it. The truth is, Lord, and I didn't preach this, but the truth is, the Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, in a way, kind of had it easy. I mean, they got thrown in the furnace, but they didn't get burnt. There are a lot of people in this room right now that can talk about scars and stuff where they've been burnt. Lord, sometimes the trial comes and it hurts. And sometimes we don't see you working in it right away. But we have so many examples of things where if we just wait and see, if we just waited and see. I wonder how many times, Lord, that we miss the miracle because we bail out too early. I wonder how many times we miss it. Anyway, will you help us not miss it? Will you help us to be patient? Will you help us to be excited about what you're doing at all times? Sounds almost like a dream, Lord, but I believe that your Spirit can do that in us. I believe that's what revival would be. I really do, Lord. And so I pray that for each person in this room that I care about so deeply. thank you for this day. Thank you for all that you're doing. And we'll just keep on going at it and studying your word and being together in this community and loving you and appreciating what you're doing. In Jesus' precious name, amen. Amen. If you're staying for the potluck, awesome. If not, have a great, great, great afternoon. We'll see you. I won't. By the way, I won't see you next week. I'm traveling.